see you guys in the dark.
I used to live at a small farm in the U.S. growing up. But as soon as I was 18, I moved out instantly. And I'll tell you why. When I was 12, me and my best friend Zach, who happened to live down the road at the time, used to go into the woods to play. Since we lived in the country, there was almost nothing to do. We would always explore and pretend to be treasure hunters. I always used to take my dad's old cowboy hat, and Zach would take a small shovel every day. But if it was a bad day, we would just play some games on my Nintendo 64. Yeah, this happened when I was like 13 years old, so it was the best that you could get. We would always go a bit deeper into the forest every time we went in. We usually managed to find something interesting in the woods, like old coins, water bottles, some nice looking stones, and some other things. Yeah, I know, really lame stuff, but we were kids at the time, and we always thought of it as treasure. I had a small box under my bed to put things in that I found, and so did Zach. We had an awesome childhood, but some creepy shit started happening over some time. One day, while we were exploring the forest again, we came across a well. We got really excited, thinking we actually found something good. We checked it out, but there was nothing special, and the well was dry. We pretty much got our hopes up for nothing. We headed back home, and another day was over. The next day was a Friday. And when we got back home from school, Zach went back to his house. I went back to mine. Not long after having lunch, Zach was at the door. I grabbed my dad's hat and opened up the door. When I opened it, Zach was there with two other boys. They were much bigger than me and Zach. Zach introduced them as his cousins, saying that they were staying with his mom and dad for the weekend. Their names were Danny and Simon. They were both 15 years old, 3 years older than me and Zach. They wanted to come with me and Zach into the woods. I agreed, so we went there. It was just a normal day for the most part, but Zach's cousins were total assholes, saying that it sucked being in the woods, and asking us how we never got bored out here. Later that night, around 11 at night, I got knocks at my bedroom window. It was Zach and his cousins. They told me to come down. I managed to get downstairs without awakening my parents. I opened the door, and the cousin asked me if I wanted to go to the woods. I had never been out there at night before, and to be honest, I really didn't want to go. And I told them that. Then they said, "Your loss." They went off in the direction of the tree line. I changed my mind, grabbed my dad's hat, and ran after them. I caught up to them, and we started walking deeper into the woods. I was scared shitless, and by the look on Zach's face, he was scared as well. The cousins stayed in front, shining their flashlights on the spooky trees. I noticed we were going in the direction of the well. I know the place like the back of my hand, so I had a plan in case shit hit the fan. We were coming up on the well. Suddenly, the cousins stopped and turned off their flashlights. We asked them what was wrong. They stood still like statues. When we went around them, since we stayed behind them, I froze as well. There was a person standing in front of the well, not looking in our direction, thankfully. I stood there like a statue, not knowing what to do. Then one of the cousins, I think it was Simon, whispered, "Turn around slowly and walk away slowly. Don't make any sudden moves." I complied, and we all turned around, started walking back slowly, so that figure wouldn't notice us. Then the terrible happened. I stood on a stick by accident and made it snap. It was loud, and we weren't far enough away from that figure, so we all stopped again. I looked back, and the figure was now looking directly at us. I almost fainted with fear. Then Danny screamed, "Run!" We all floored it. I dropped my hat while running back, but I didn't stop to pick it up. I had no idea if the figure was following us, since all of our footsteps made it hard to make out. I didn't look back either, so I didn't know. We all managed to make it back safely. I ran into my house, slammed the door shut. My parents were awake, and I got shouted at by my parents, and I was grounded for a week. But they also looked really relieved. My mom hugged me and said that I'm glad that you're safe. I was confused and asked them why they were so worried about. Then they told me something that made me even more scared. They told me that recently an escaped killer was on the loose, and he was last spotted in our area. When my dad saw that I wasn't in my room, since he usually comes to check up on me, and the front door wasn't shut, they thought that I had been kidnapped, and they were about to call the police when I came through the door. After hearing that, I started crying. My parents asked me why. I told them what had happened. Their faces were full of horror. After telling them all of that, they called the police immediately. Later on they arrived. I explained everything to them, and they said that they would take a look into the woods. They did. Half an hour later, they came back with nothing, but they said that the next day they would bring more cops to search the area some more, and warned me not to go into the woods again. I obliged. I could barely sleep that night, because I was so afraid that the man would come for me. The next day, more cops came to our farm and started investigating the woods. They also went to Zach's house. My mom came in and said that she found my dad's hat on the doorstep. I remembered that last night I had dropped it. How did it get there? I thought about some more, and the man in the woods came to mind. I started panicking again. My parents calmed me down and asked me what was wrong. I told them about the hat. They had nervous looks on their faces. My dad took the hat to the cop outside. I managed to calm down again, and for the rest of the day, I played video games. Since my parents grounded me anyway. Around lunchtime, we got a knock at the door. I answered it. It was Zach and his mom. Zach's mom asked if she could talk to my parents. I told my parents that they were at the door. Then they told us to go into my room and go play something. I put my ear against the door and listened. Zach's mom told my parents that Danny wasn't in the house in the morning, and after hearing the news about that creep in the woods, she began to worry. One thing didn't make sense, though. All four of us made it out safely. I was confused. Then Zach told me something that scared the living shit out of me. He said Danny had left the house when they got back. He left while Simon and Zach were sleeping, although Zach wasn't sleeping. Zach said that he looked out the window and saw him walk into the woods. He wanted to stop him, but he said that he was scared to go out there again. He never came back. I asked him why he left. Zach didn't know. Then Simon came over to hang out later on. I asked him if he knew why Danny had left the house. He said he had an idea. Danny always used to carry around his dead mother's ring with him, since his mom had died a year prior to the events of the story. He always used to keep it in a box, and he would take it wherever he would go, and Simon checked the box in the morning, and it was empty. He must have dropped it while we were running from the guy last night. After that day, as weeks went by, the guy in the woods was never caught. The cops started an investigation on Danny's disappearance. He was also never found, and me and Zach never went back into the woods again. Once we reached 18, we bought a house between each other and became roommates. Nothing's better than having a roommate as your best friend. I'm 25 years old now. I live with my girlfriend, and I still hang out with Zach. But even after all that time, I still think about that night every day, and I probably will for the rest of my life. Trigger warning, my story includes details of rape. This is something that I've never told anyone I know. I've shared a lot of it with my boyfriend, but he can't exactly handle hearing the full story. It makes him so sick and angry for me. I told a therapist, but she told me that I was lying, only because she knew the person that was involved. I would like to be referred to as anonymous due to the sensitivity, and the person involved still being free. My sister and I, well, we're very close. Our father was very physically abusive, and we lived alone with him for 13 years. So once we finally were free from him, we ended up staying very close. I lived with my mom, and she lived with her husband, but I'd frequently stay at their house for about 6 years as I started staying when I was 10. I guess I should say that my sister's 10 years older than me, and her husband is 12 years older than me. Once I started getting older, probably about 14, along with our usual playing video games and watching movies, we started smoking weed together on my visits. It was so fun, and I loved hanging out with them. One day, when I was about to turn 16, I noticed her husband started acting strange towards me. I kind of shrugged it off as me just being paranoid because of trust issues with men due to my past. As time went on, I knew that it wasn't just me. He would text me very sexually inappropriate questions, asking if I had sex yet, and hinting that if I were to get a boyfriend, he would be very jealous. This worried me a lot, so I told my mom and showed her the texts. She told me he was just playing, and he didn't mean anything by it. It was very frustrating because I knew deep down in my gut this behavior was unacceptable. But my mom was a smart woman, and I found usually she was right about things, so I just put it into the back of my mind. He would occasionally text me weird things after that, mainly just calling me cute or something subtle, and I would just pretend that I didn't notice. I did, however, show my cousin some of the messages when we were at the family Christmas, and then she said that I didn't want to say anything, but he looks at you very strangely. It gives me the shivers. I felt relieved in a sense because now I knew someone else believed me. I readdressed the issue to my mom, and she reassured me that we were just overreacting, so I decided to give it a rest. Fast forward about 6 months. I'm 16, and it's summer break, so I go to my sister's house as usual because the weird behavior calmed down a lot. We played video games and got high all night without incident. I went to bed and slept about 10 hours. It was around 10 a.m., and I couldn't sleep anymore. My sister, her husband, and their roommate were all asleep still, so I decided to watch some TV. About 10 minutes after turning on the TV, I hear someone coming downstairs, and her husband comes and sits on the other couch. Says, "Good morning, what are you watching?" I'm like, "Oh, I just turned on the first thing. I'm not really sure. It was some weird little cartoon show." He laughed awkwardly and looked over at my shirt that had Invader Zim on it, and said while walking across the room to the couch that I was on. He said that I love that shirt, it's cute, and started loading a bowl into the bong. I felt extremely uncomfortable and said thank you. He then kept messing with the bong, and I tried to act very interested in the show as he handed it to me to hit it. I hit it, and it tasted a little funny, but the bong was pretty dirty. I sat and watched the show for a little while more. Then I started to feel pretty drowsy. He was watching me and said, "This show is silly, just like you. You're really silly." And he started forcibly kissing me. I was very shocked and scared. I tried to pull away. Then I realized that I couldn't move or make a noise of any sort. I was heavy, and all I could do was look in horror as he forced himself on me and stripped me. I just kept thinking that my sister is upstairs. How is this happening? I remember it hurting so bad, and him whispering how much he had dreamed of doing this since he first met me. He first met me when I was 9 years old. I just felt pain, tears running down my face, and absolute horror. All of a sudden, there's creaking at the top of the steps, and he hurried and put my shorts on, my now dead body weight, and went onto the other couch. It was their roommate. He looked at me and didn't say anything, but by the look in his eyes and the way that he looked at my sister's husband, he knew. Next thing I know, I'm waking up to my sister saying that it's 2 p.m. Are you ready to go home? I couldn't talk. All I could muster was a very confused, dazed nod, and it all went black again. I had horrible nightmares and a seemingly endless sleep, and woke up again to my sister saying, "Come on, it's 9 p.m. Mom's pissed that you haven't got home." I was so dazed still. I couldn't remember much. I couldn't form sentences, but I knew what happened. He was still there in the room holding her on the couch across from me after raping me, not even 12 hours before. I know I should have said something, but I was in such a fog, I barely walked myself to the car. I don't remember anything between sitting in the car and waking up at 9 a.m. the next morning to my mom very pissed that I was sleeping so much, and telling me that I had to do chores, and that she was leaving for work. I stayed in a fog, not feeling right for days, and didn't say a word. I didn't tell anyone until a month later when I confessed to my mom what happened. She called my sister, to which she said, "I know they had sex. We're in an open relationship," and she told him that she wanted it. "If you try and press charges, I will kill myself." Considering the past with attempts from her, my mom believed this, and told her okay, but I don't ever want him near our family again, and told me it had been taken care of. I was hurt. No one did anything about it. Sure, I never had to see him again, but 5 years later, my sister, who was once my best friend, is still married to him, and he has never once had any consequences for his actions. I didn't put all the pieces together until about 2 years ago. I chalked up the passing out and grogginess for days as an effort from trauma, but now I realize that he never smoked out of that bowl. I got date raped by the man that I considered a brother, with my sister right upstairs. The worst part is, I thought of him as a brother, and he has a sister the exact same age as me, and I have to wonder if I'm his first or last victim. I don't want to waste my time, so I'll just get to the point. It was warm on June 7th. We were out on some errands when we saw it. An old abandoned house with a for sale sign. I thought that we could use this house for a backup, as we already had trouble paying for our current house. I know, it's a horrible idea, but what choice do we have? Either risk paying overdue or buy a shitty, also very cheap house. Seemed like the smart thing to do. Well, as you'll soon find out, we regretted it. Within a month of buying it, we started going to the damn beast. From the second that we pushed open the frail, crumbling door, the worst possible smell came billowing from the floorboards. It was like an animal, no, 100 animals, died right in front of us and tore themselves apart. As we searched the area, my roommate Matt said jokingly, "Hey, you never know, Tom. There could have been a murder here." Big mistake. Big mistake. Because just after he said that, he opened a closet. What he was met with smelt worse than the entire house. As he opened it, a swarm of tiny little fuckers flied out and fled. Roaches, flies, and other winged insects made their way out through the chimney. He screamed like a little bitch for about an hour. At least it seemed like that, but it was only 3 seconds. Enough to make me deaf in one ear. I smiled and said, "Speak of the devil." He glared at me through his green eyes. We called the cops, but they just shook their heads. "Sorry, kid, but this body has been here for about 56 years. He turned to his comrade. "Tell Arambo we found the guy." Matt, still throwing up, finally had the strength to ask, "What guy?" "Marco Philly. He was missing years ago, from Connecticut. Never thought that he would end up here." "Connecticut? We're in Washington. How does that even happen?" "If only—" "Hey, Sarge, take a look at this." The call came from upstairs. The officer frowned and proceeded to walk up the flight of stairs to the next room. We followed. I wish we hadn't. Lying there on the floor of the upstairs bedroom were 55 rotten, torn up, decomposing bodies. "Woo, that's an eye load, isn't it, Cooper?" "Why is there 55? "I don't know." He grabbed his radio and peeped into it. "Madison, any files on 5543 Arlen Avenue?" We heard a squawk in return. "Let me get that for you." We waited for about 30 seconds. "Sarge, get the fuck out of here." "Why?" "There's a murderer lurking in that house. He'll—" The police immediately pulled out their guns. I had no clue what was going on. They searched the house, keeping us in between them as we couldn't be left unguarded. They searched the whole house. We left, and they made us stay at the police station. It wasn't for about 3 days that they got the bastard. He was caught when he tried bringing a butcher knife into the home. Then the police surrounded him. He went through a tunnel and escaped right into the hands of the cops. He wouldn't give up and swung at a cop. They blew him to bits. But just thinking about it, we could have been his next victim. We were actually scheduled to meet him the day that he was caught. If we didn't, we would be dead as well. This took place my sophomore year of high school. I was a 15-year-old girl, young for my grade. It was a Wednesday in the winter. I joined the honor society at my school. Besides meeting and talking about how to help my community, we also had to meet at 7:20 a.m., which was 25 minutes before school started. Since I wasn't a morning person, missing more time to sleep was always frustrating. That's why I was always late, which on this day, I was running late. Being 15, I couldn't drive myself to school, so I had to have my grandmother do it, who lives with my mother and I. Take me to school, since at this time my mother would be in the bathroom, putting on makeup before work. My grandma opened the garage with the button on the garage wall. Both my grandmother and I got into her car, which was parked in the garage, of course. Once closing the door, she would pull out into the driveway. Now, she looked back towards the front windshield to pull out to the right, towards the street to pull out into our cul-de-sac, and I screamed to stop. She quickly slammed on the brakes. There was a man. He was about 6 foot tall, dirty blonde-looking hair, wearing all black. He was only illuminated by the headlights since on winter mornings it was pitch dark, and today it was raining outside. I noticed something in his hand. Being the observant person that I was, I thought that I saw a black handle. The man didn't look at us, explain himself, or wave a hand to say sorry. He just stopped in front of the lights for about 3 seconds before continuing to walk through our yard towards our neighbor's house. We watched him disappear into the dark. I live in a neighborhood where we all know each other and watch out for each other. We all own about 1 acre of land. Recently, my neighbors have been having work done around their houses, with taking down some trees and fixing up their house. So my grandmother, with her heart of gold, continued driving as we discussed what just happened. She assumed that he was just a worker. I knew that he wasn't. I told her I thought that he had a knife, and she brushed it off, saying maybe it was a worker holding a dustpan or a shovel. He could have been just using our yard as a shortcut. But no, something told me that I had to warn my mother. So I was trying to text my mother, but no texts were sending. Nothing was going through. I texted lock the door, but when it went through, she didn't understand why. She questioned me saying, "What? Why?" At this point I called her, quickly explaining the situation and yelling at her to bolt the locked door. She did, and not a second later, he opened our screen door and tried to open our door handle. When it didn't work, he tried to kick the door down. My mother then called the police. I don't know how quickly they arrived, but we live in a small town, so I assume the response time was pretty fast. When the police arrived, she told them what happened. They write up a report. Later that morning, the man was found a couple of roads down. He tried to get into some other houses too, when he ended up getting into a house, and a man had chased him out with a shotgun. He was caught and arrested, found with a large butcher knife in his hand. Although this isn't an extreme story, it holds a lot of what-ifs. What if I hadn't been late to school? What if I hadn't gotten a hold of my mom? And the biggest one of all, what if I wasn't late and my grandmother would have asked him if he needed any help? I'm now a junior in high school. It's been about a year, but the effects of this encounter still haunt me. I'm afraid to be alone. I'll double-check or even triple-check my locks and listen intently to the sounds of my house when trying to go to sleep. If I hear something, I'll try to go check it out. He's made me pretty paranoid, but I guess my fears are rational. Who expects their own home to be the site of a creep encounter? I was the average teenage cheerleader in high school, and you know how high school is. I went to a party, and all 180 of us decided we would play the spin the bottle. The rules are simple. If the bottle lands on you, you have to kiss the person in the closet. One kid spud the bottle, and it landed on me. I went in the closet hesitantly and went to the closet. Something made my contacts pop out. The person was ready for me to kiss them, so I just closed my eyes and kissed him. The problem was the person said I wasn't kissing them. I glanced into the darkness, not able to see a thing, and saw a black figure. I let out a scream as it pulled me deeper into the closet. I held on for dear life, and the kid that I forgot was in the closet scratched the thing, made it let me go. I pulled out my spare glasses that I kept just in case, and we went out to tell everyone the story. The owner of the house said that the closet was not deeper. I got chills on that. I told them since I didn't kiss the kid in the closet, I would kiss the kid in front of everyone. The kid was so happy, and I was just relieved to be alive. The next few days, everyone teased me about liking a non-popular, but I just brushed them all off.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.